I remember it so clearly. Someone had referred this divorced client to me with a very high reference, and I had a wonderful meeting with that client. She clearly appreciated me, and I look forward to working with her as a real honor and a privilege. But she looked me in the eye and she said, "Gary." Welcome to the Free Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Miles. I trust only you. I don't want anyone else touching my case. Can you imagine what that felt like? I felt like receiving a standing ovation. It was proof to me that all those decades of preparation, sacrifice, and sleepless nights had really been worth it. This was the ultimate validation of me as a caring, empathetic professional. It just made me feel so good. And wouldn't it make you feel the same way? But then a second wave came over me. Years later, a different client said the exact same words, and this time my stomach dropped. Not because the words had changed, but because I finally understood what they actually meant. What those words meant was I had not had a real break in years. They meant that my associates sat on the sidelines, never developing confidence, never supporting me on cases. It meant that I was the only one handling these cases, and I couldn't grow and build the team. And it meant that the firm had a single point of failure, me. And that single point was exhausted. So here's my question for you to ponder and think over with some care. What if the compliment you've been proudest of receiving is actually the lock on a prison that looks like a palace? Stay with me, because by the end of this episode, I'm going to give you the exact language to use the next time a client says those words to you. And I'm going to show you 3 shifts that can change the entire trajectory of your practice starting this week. See, attorney burnout does not always look like exhaustion. That's what we think, right? I'm on the verge of burnout. You see this haggard, tired, stressed attorney. But sometimes attorney burnout looks like loyalty. Sometimes it wears the disguise of the nicest thing a client has ever said to you. And today I'm going to unpack what this compliment actually cost you. I'm going to explain why you've been tolerating those costs. And I'm going to give you 3 shifts you can start this week to make a change. So I've been practicing law for 46 years in Maryland. I spent 30 years managing a boutique litigation firm. I had a clerkship in federal court. I tried a lot of jury cases. I had 12 consecutive trucking victories as a defense lawyer, which is hard to do. I'm the author of Breaking Free and the host of this podcast, The Free Lawyer. And mostly I've suffered through all these things I talk about. I've been there. I've done that. I've lived this, not just studied it. Before I explain why this compliment has such a grip on us, I want you to see what it's actually costing you. Because these costs are real, measurable, and compounding. But most attorneys never connect them back to the flattering compliment that client gave you that started it all. And that's what makes this trap so effective. It doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like proof you're doing something right. Proof that you finally arrived. Proof that you really know what you're doing. But it has dramatic cost. Cost number 1 is you become the bottleneck. Every decision, every communication, every strategy runs through you personally. Your 60-hour weeks quietly become 70-hour weeks because you have to spend so much time overseeing and managing the team that you aren't fully trusted to handle things. You're not leading a firm. You're performing a one-person show with a supporting cast, and you can't scale the practice because everything depends on your constant presence. And being the bottleneck is a problem. Cost number 2, your team stops growing. And this is the part that most attorneys miss. When a client says, "I trust only you," in front of your associate, what does your associate hear? They hear, "You're not good enough." That single moment erodes your team's confidence. Your associates never develop skills interacting with clients, speaking to them, advising them, listening to them, because they've never been given room to try. The gap between your capability and skills and theirs starts to widen as you grow and they don't. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that started with a compliment. I had that experience myself. I had an attorney work with me for over 12 years. I tried a lot of jury cases, and he had never tried one. And I had a number of cases while he was working with me, and never once did I let him try a case, nor even bring him along as second chair. He never had a chance to learn and grow. And later in his career, I realized that I had failed him because he had never developed that skill of trying a jury case, which in many practices is a really essential, critical, and economically beneficial skill to have. And I regret that I didn't do that. I've learned from that mistake. The third cost is your practice becomes untransferable. Succession planning is nearly impossible because you can't hand off what was never built to be shared. The firm you spent decades creating has a single point of failure, and that single point is showing up tired to the office every Monday morning. And cost number 4 is your boundaries dissolve. The client who trusts only you also expects you to answer their text at 9 p.m. on a Saturday. You skip your daughter's recital, you check email on vacation, and your phone comes to every family dinner because you are indispensable. You're needed. Only you. And then you suffer the Sunday night dread, the 4 a.m. anxiety, and you're never fully present at home. And the very thing that feels like loyalty from a client is actually a symptom of a leadership model built on external authority rather than sustainable systems. And here's something we're sitting with. Your client isn't really saying, "I trust only you," as a compliment. What they're really saying is, "I'm scared, and you make me feel safe." And that's a beautiful thing on many levels, isn't it? But it's not something one person should have to carry alone. Think about it. Your client is going through one of the most stressful experiences of their life. They're looking for an anchor. They're looking for someone to rescue them and stabilize them, and you've become that anchor. But when you're the only anchor, what happens the day when you can't be there? And that day will come one way or another. When you build a team that your clients trust, you're not taking away their safety net. You're making it bigger. You're making it stronger. And you're ensuring that that safety net is for them when you are not. You're ensuring that they are protected even when you can't be in the room. And that's not abandonment. That's the highest form of service. See, instead of thinking, "I need to let go, I need to have someone else help me on these things," think of it this way. I owe it to my clients to build something bigger than myself. If what I'm describing sounds familiar, if you're nodding along right now thinking that's me, I want you to know 2 things. First, you're not alone. Every accomplished attorney I've coached has felt this. Second, there is a way out. I'd love to talk with you about it. Visit GaryMiles.net to schedule a complimentary coaching call, or you can do it on the link in the show notes. No pressure, no pitch, just a real conversation about where you are and where you want to be. Scott Aaron, one of the leaders on LinkedIn, says this about me: "Gary Miles is not just a lawyer with over 40 plus years of experience. He is, more importantly, a dear friend of mine. His knowledge and expertise of the law profession and all it encompasses makes him an expert in his space. If you are a law professional who is struggling to find that balance, then look no further. I could not recommend him enough. So now you can see the costs. They're real. But here's the question that matters. If the costs are so high, why do we keep tolerating them? Why does this compliment have such a grip on us? The answer runs much deeper than professional pride, although certainly that's part of it. It has to do with our identity. It has to do with a self-belief that we didn't really know we were experiencing. We were wired early for success, for competition, for being the only one. Whether it was law school rankings or partnership decisions, the message was clear. Our value lies in being exceptional. The more exceptional we are, the more successful we'll be, the more in demand we'll be. And being needed became truly indistinguishable from being worthy. That's the equation. Being needed equaled being valuable. If we weren't needed, we were replaceable. We were not valuable. And that's why I call the external authority trap. When your sense of professional worth depends on how much others depend on you. It feels like the crowning achievement of your career, but it's actually a cage built from compliments. And I want to talk about the difference between being indispensable and invaluable. And this is the confusion that traps elite attorneys. If I'm not indispensable, I'm not valuable. And that belief sabotages every attempt at delegation. You assign a task to an associate. Then you redo their work at midnight. You introduce a colleague to a client. Then you hover over their meeting like a nervous parent at a first play date. Every time you pull work back to yourself, the belief gets reinforced. But what if your client's inability to trust anyone else on your team isn't really a compliment to you, that they trust only you? But what if instead it's a reflection of a leadership model that has to evolve? And that's not an accusation, it's an invitation. Because the moment you see the pattern, you can change it. Now that you understand what it's costing you and you understand why you've been tolerating it, let's talk about what to do about it. These are not productivity hacks or delegation tips. These are identity shifts. And that's why they actually work. Any accomplished attorney can start making these shifts this week. Shift number 1 is to redefine the compliment. Next time a client says, "I trust only you," resist the surge of pride. Resist the desire to pat yourself on the back for being so successful and finally having arrived. Instead, hear it as a diagnostic signal, not a trophy. It's telling you your systems, your team, your firm's identity aren't yet visible enough. The goal isn't to make yourself less trusted. It's to make your entire team worthy of that same trust. Sometimes it comes down to leadership. Sometimes have you put them front and center? Have you complimented them to others? But whatever it is, your goal is to make your entire team, your entire firm, your entire operation worthy of that same trust that the client has in you, but right now has in only you. Shift number 2, introduce your team as an extension of your standards. Stop presenting your associates as substitutes. Position them as proof of your leadership. And the language matters. Here's the exact reframe. The old way you would say it is, "Sorry, Mr. Client, I wasn't available." New way, "I've trained my team to my standards." Because your case deserves that kind of depth, a full team behind it, not just one person. In other words, explain your team's involvement as an elevation of service, not as a dilution, not as taking away from you, but as a bigger, broader, more powerful team. And by the way, this is the language I promised you at the very top of this episode. I'll say it again because it's so important. I've trained my team to my standards because your case deserves that kind of depth, a full team behind it, not just one person. Shift number 3 is let your absence prove your leadership. And trust me, I know this is the hardest one. But set your boundaries deliberately and then let your team demonstrate what they're capable of. When you're unreachable and your associate handles a client call with skill, that client learns something powerful. This firm is trustworthy, not just this one lawyer. And every successful handoff becomes evidence that your standards live in the culture that you've created. The measure of your leadership is not how much clients ask for you. It's how well things run when they don't have to. You know, the client compliment is wonderful, but there's actually a much better compliment out there. And it's actually one most attorneys have never heard because their practices were never designed to earn it. These are some even better client compliments. Instead of, I trust only you, how about when your client says, your entire firm is exceptional, or your associate handled that brilliantly, or I knew my case was in great hands even when you were out of the office. That's a compliment that truly signals freedom. It means you've built something that transcends your personal presence. It's not a loss of importance. It's the highest form of attorney leadership that there is. After 46 years in practice and more than 3 decades managing a firm, the proudest moments were not when clients said, I trust only you. They were when clients said, your whole team is incredible. That feeling is so powerful. It gave me a deep, quiet relief knowing I'd built something that would last, knowing that I could take a vacation and things would run smoothly, knowing that if I was ill or had to tend to somebody in the family, the practice would still run in exactly the same way. It is important for me to know that I didn't have to suffer to survive. I didn't have to suffer to thrive as an attorney and for my practice to grow. That honored both my standards and my life. So let me leave you with these 2 questions I'd like you to reflect on. Is your practice built on personal dependency or on institutional excellence? And 2, are you the firm's greatest asset or its single point of failure? That answer will determine whether you spend the next decade trapped inside a palace you built yourself, or finally free to enjoy what you've earned. If you're ready to stop being the only person your clients trust and start building something bigger, I'd love to talk. Visit GaryMiles.net to schedule a complimentary coaching call, or there's a link in the notes below. Pick up a copy of my book, Breaking Free, A Guide to Achieving Personal and Professional Freedom as a Lawyer, where I unpack the 12 prisons of the mind and the 12 keys to unlock them. And if this podcast episode spoke to you, share with a colleague who needs to hear it, and subscribe wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. Thank you for being with me here today. As always, practice law with purpose, live your life with freedom, and until I see you next week,